Great.
All right. Good deal. Well, thanks everybody. Again, my name's Rusty Kennington. I'm the CIO at the Henry Company. Henry Company is a really well-led company, private equity owned in the building envelope system space. So we are an instrumental part of the construction industry, both repair, restoration, as well as new construction. And it's been an exciting move for me. It's what I'm going to share with you is just kind of some of the things that I've gone through, toolkit, if you will, almost, and in specific experiences here. But I've really had to bootstrap strategic, high value, high energy IT teams in the last handful of customers that I've been with. And so I'm just going to share with you kind of my approach to doing it and kind of some specifics about what we're doing here. So a little background, like I mentioned, Henry, great company, been around, I don't know, not quite 100 years, but the IT team has always been chartered just to keep the lights on as best you can. You know, historically family-owned company and grown both naturally and through acquisition over the years, and a great team, small team, buried, and they are very knowledgeable about our company. But they're too small to do anything as good as they could. They have the capability to do. The CEO's been there 5 or 6 years. He's methodically really created world-class operations, sales, and internal systems as well. And now he's moving on to IT, and that's when they brought me on to do just that. So my goal specifically is to get upstream in the conversation. You know, typically more traditional legacy IT teams end up really becoming order takers, and out of a desire to do well, but they typically are not in the upstream conversation. By the time whatever kind of leader or some other group, whether it's sales, finance, operations, marketing, you name it, by the time they come to those kind of groups, they've already thought through the problem, come up with the solution that they want, and are handing an IT team a request to implement or create this solution. We need to go way upstream of that, because if we're not in that conversation, there is a whole lot of possible that doesn't ever hit the table. And that's really what I want to change. So that's the first thing I want to change. Second thing is I'm going to be changing expectations, both within IT, what we expect of ourselves, both our capabilities, our speed, and our role. But I'm also going to change the expectations that every other leader in this company has with what IT should do. I think that too often IT is not present in that part of the conversation, and people start practicing their own medicine. And I've been at many companies where that was kind of the culture. And my answer in that is there's a doctor on the island now. And so you put the scalpel down. And there's a difference between giving yourself Advil and giving yourself an appendectomy. And, if any of us went to a doctor and we pointed to our abdomen and said, well, I think I've got appendicitis, give me the scalpel. And that person hands you a scalpel, they're no doctor. And it's the same for IT. We can't just take an order and implement. Our responsibility, our duty is much higher than that. They should expect more from us. And that's part of what I'm going to change there. And then the last note I have here is to move mountains. We are going to be getting skins on the wall. The opportunity in front of us is huge. And it was this way for many companies before COVID. COVID has kind of accentuated it, but we are differentiating the customer experience. We are looking to differentiate the internal experience. This company is so well focused on world-class operational processes, every link in the chain that leads to becoming the supplier of choice. Every leader's got that same mission. And so it's very refreshing to be a part of that kind of team. We've got a big load that we've got to bear too, in terms of enabling as many things as technology can enable. So that's what my goal is there. Anytime any of us leaders is doing any kind of change, disruption is kind of the more extreme representation of that. We've got to be mindful, at least myself, I've got to be mindful, and I wasn't always like this. So lesson learned here is that we naturally think there's a big difference between disruption and destruction, and there should be. But there's a lot of commonality too. Whenever we're going about this change management, this digital transformation, whatever you want to call it, we are ripping up a lot of roots of long established trees and processes that people hold dear. And whether the mandate comes from a CEO or whoever it's going to come from, and people agree on paper and in PowerPoint that, yeah, we're going to be doing this thing, the real roots are in the trenches. And that's what we've got to be very, very mindful of. And so nobody likes change. I'm a change leader, and I don't like change when it's inflicted on me. And so we've got to meet people where they are and understand that they need to understand why. The main difference, I believe, between disruption and destruction is disruption has a why. And it's our job to make sure we're telling that story. And so this is kind of the art side of what we do. Yeah, we've got to understand technologies and processes and frameworks and things like that, clearly. But we also need to understand that the burden of proof is on us. At least this is the way I approach my job, and this is just my way. Our story should never be a technology story. Even when I'm going to a board and I'm requesting money for cybersecurity, I'm not throwing cybersecurity at them. It's all about what aspects of the business I'm trying to protect. And so for me, in this change, particularly here, 90 days in, it's all about really learning our business. I need to know how we make money. I need to know how our customers make money. And because we are engineering everything we do from the customer inward. And so if I can understand our company and our language, I can speak the language, know our business. I've begun to develop some credibility. And it's only by earning and keeping credibility will I be able to do something with this story that I'm trying to do. And like I mentioned, it's really all about people. You know, it's technology and all these other. Those are some of the what that we use, but the why and the how. It's all about. It's going to impact people. You know, and so I've got to work my way inside IT and outside IT to really understand the nature of what I've got. And so for me now, 90 days in, measuring what I've got, and then really seeking to take this team and this capability light years from where we are now. It's all about understanding what I've got. I'm very fortunate, and was fortunate in my last role where I inherited really, really good people and good at what they did. We just didn't have enough, and we weren't aimed at doing all the right things that we need to do. So I have to focus on that. But I've also got to understand the company culture. And again, another lesson I learned the hard way, which seems to be the only way I ever learned anything, but was sometimes I used to fight the culture in terms of instituting a change. Yes, the change made sense for our business. I got agreement within the C-suite to do these things, and then I just fought it, which was clearly the wrong way to go. So I had this notion of the pace of the river. I've got to understand, and I teach this to all the leaders that work for me and anyone that I'm talking with who's really charged with changing things. Understand the pace of the river, and you're not going to swim any faster, and you shouldn't swim any slower than the pace that company can handle. And it has to do with cultural change, has to do with what capacity for change each business group has. So we're a manufacturing company. And so I am much more likely to be able to make longer moves down the field in terms of change during the lighter part of our season than during busy season, for all the obvious reasons. I mean, everyone's focused on producing product and getting it shipped and making it right. And so just being in tune with what that is will go a long way toward the success of my efforts. You know, I think that results are clearly why we're in the chair that we're in. Without it, nothing else matters. And so that's how we measure our effectiveness as a leader. But I think the job, in order to get there, is to build a great team. And that's why I've selected this topic to talk about. It's always about the great team. And teams, great people don't just make a great team. It's an act of collision. You know, you're taking talented people, many of whom haven't worked together, and certainly haven't worked together in the way that you're taking them, even if you're just working solely with the team you got and just making a more capable team. And so I put a lot of focus on who I've got in the team and what we're doing. And so I start with this current state. So what do I have? What are they good at? What chair are they in? Do they need to be in that chair? And what's missing? And so I find that I've got to deal with skill sets. I've got to deal with internal processes and also technology stack and other capabilities, and then be ready to augment, be ready to move people around, and have to set the bar. And so we always have options on how to get there. When I'm evaluating this team, there's a couple of just absolute non-negotiables for me. One is their moral or ethical compass. It's got to be right. If it's not, they're done. I have no time to wait for that. They just need to find somewhere else to be. Another one is attitude. And with attitude, I'll give a short leash because they may have just learned wrong with somewhere else earlier in their career, but I don't give a lot of time. But attitude is something we always control. We don't necessarily control what we're facing every day and what situation we're thrown into, but attitude is something we do, and I need really, really positive attitude. I also encourage something that can really be hard to manage, and it's seeking people who are very different. And it's just not just background, and it's not just the obvious stuff, but it's also perspectives, how they go about solving a problem. Style is a huge thing. And these things can be tough to manage at first because you may have someone whose style is just different. It just rubs people the wrong way. Well, it's all of our job to adapt to that. And to understand that if the other traits that I'll talk to in a minute are good, then we need to really actually get past tolerating difference, because that's superficial. To me, that's just not real. You don't just tolerate it and you don't just accept it. You got to mature enough to the point where you genuinely appreciate the value that people who think differently and come at a problem differently really bring to your team. And so, some of the things, the traits that I look for people that are genuinely humble. They are not in it for the win for themselves. They're not in it for their own glory. They're seeking to be part of something much bigger than themselves. They're looking to make the people around them better. I like people that are smart, obviously, but that feed themselves, that are hungry, that want to continue to learn, that are constantly honing their craft. I look for people, and maybe this touches on the humility side, but they're open to being wrong. They're open to maybe a new way of doing things. They're definitely open to getting feedback. And the kind of feedback I'm talking about, in addition to the attaboys and celebrations, which are important, feedback is important to get, especially when it's hard to give. But I've found that, and I've taught leaders on my teams in the past, that giving constructive feedback that may be hard to hear, at least you may think it would be hard to hear, is one of the most loving acts you can do as a manager for anybody. And so I think if we approach it as a leader with no venom, with love, and with a sense of duty, we owe this person this team we got to give them feedback. And so I look for people like that. I think I've got this saying that, in the ham and egg breakfast, the chicken is just involved, but the pig is committed. And I've got a no chicken rule. It's got to really matter to everyone in this team that we cross that finish line, and that everyone crosses it. That even if their job is done, we're not done, and they're not done until everyone makes it across. And so I want people that are in it for that bigger win, that really look for the broader success, and where winning matters, hitting the deadline matters, making a difference matters. So my desired end state here at Henry is obviously the run work, the keeping the lights on work has got to work. Without that, nothing else matters. We don't have a seat. We don't earn a seat. But that's got to work. And right now, the team is fully consumed with just trying to keep up with that. And it's really, really hard with good people, too. I think I want this team to be sought to be in the conversation. I want others to think, you know what? We're facing this challenge or this opportunity or this business mission, this goal. Let's include IT in this part of the conversation. I want our team to be fully transparent. And I've been doing IT for a long time, and we've always walked ourselves into this black box where we're just getting all kinds of requests. We're doing all this work. We're trying to prioritize what we think is the most important thing. And before you know it, executives are starting to ask, like, where's the money going? IT is always one of the bigger items on any budget. And what are they doing? What are they working on? I was in a Fortune 500 company years ago, and serving all of America's operations from an IT standpoint. And we had a president of the Americas. We wanted to review with him because he was one of those guys asking, where's the money going? And it's the right question to ask. He couldn't believe all the things on the roadmap that we were executing on and that were in our backlog. Could not believe it. And I said, we didn't make any of this up. This came from the 5,000 people that report to you, all of it. And it was while eye-opening to him, it was a real light bulb moment for me that it is my job as this leader to make sure there is never a dark spot, that they always know what we're being asked to do. So I will make sure that we're doing that we've got intake processes, governance processes, and PMO type processes that allow us to always be transparent with what we're working on, why we're working on it. The leadership team has chosen priorities, not IT. We're a part of it. And that they know what to expect and what's backlog, what we're not working on. And there will be no question that we were always adding the value that we were brought there to do. So that's my goal. That's where we're going. And so early moves I've currently made already. So from an internal side, I filled a couple of gaps. We didn't really have a competency in what I'll call the engaging stakeholders across the business analyst talent, which I think the VA is the tip of the spear in IT. I think for anyone not sitting still and moving forward, that's the conduit through which we do it. There's an art to it. They've got to be really good at not just soliciting requirements, but guiding the conversation and kind of sniffing out ambiguity and the difference between ambiguity that's okay, that won't hit us in the back of the head downstream, and ambiguity that could really disrupt what we're developing unless we figure it out now. And so I want them to be intuitive. I want them to be able to carry on a conversation, be articulate, and be able to capture what we're being asked to do in a way that allows us to manage it, allows us to schedule it, allows us to deliver it. So we're making moves on that. I've looked at a lot of what we're doing, and I classify it as what I call commodity work. Doesn't mean it's not critical. It's absolutely critical. Things like monitoring our platforms, monitoring our network, cybersecurity, the IT help desk, some of those things. I've decided that given the talent that I've got and the familiarity they have with our company, I'm offloading a bunch of that work. And in fact, we just moved to a managed data center over the weekend. So that movement has begun. We're outsourcing cybersecurity monitoring, a handful of these things, so that my team can really focus on where this company's going and what they need us to do. And then we're also developing internal processes, an accurate but highly efficient PMO to really help us manage the intake of the work that we're doing and the transparency with which we're doing it, even amongst ourselves. And so we've got internal process. We're meeting now more than we used to. We've got daily stand-ups. We've got other things that aren't a meeting beatdown, but they're critical for collaboration and communication and all of us knowing where we all are. And I had an executive once tell me that they drove a Porsche, not because of how fast it goes from 0 to 60, but how fast it goes from 60 to 0. And the analogy I bring here is processes like PMO and some of this governance and intake, which, 10 years ago, I would have just run away from because I would just get the fear of bureaucracy and bogging me down. I leverage these competencies now in order to allow me to move faster. These are the things that allows us to find that higher gear and to keep us on the rails. And so that's what we're doing there. Externally, I've done some mock-ups and some demos to the executives and bouncing ideas off in terms of a new digital customer experience, changing and augmenting the nature of how we deal with various customers. We've got wholesalers, dealers, general contractors, architects, a broad swath of very different customers who want a very different experience. And so really showing what's possible there, showing what's possible from an analytics standpoint. And what we can do is we start getting insight into in-the-moment data, real-time information, and the kinds of indications that help us understand what actions to take immediately. And then leading into using AI and ML to help us really predict and stay out of things. So I've begun to already show what's possible and get input, and the input is what's most valuable, because that's really helping to validate what I'm doing from a roadmap standpoint. And so I put together the roadmap for 2021, the budgets necessary to deal with it, and the staffing necessary to deal with it. And so I've reviewed that already. And so these are kind of where I am right now. And I've really sanity checked everything in this roadmap where we're going to help folks like our customer service platform and really surfacing a lot of things that are just having to be done the hard way right now. So, this is the toughest part of a new role for me because it's really, I don't have skins on the wall yet. So it's really, they've got to kind of believe what they're hearing right now, which I don't like. So my anticipation is by the end of this year, we'll have a first shot at the first version of a customer portal. We'll have a first handful of some BI dashboards in place, but the real meat will be Q1. So Q1 we'll have some good initial deliverables, some things we'll be able to get in front of some customers as well, and then the remaining part of the year, it's going to be a tremendous amount of transformation in a lot of areas, both internal infrastructure, running the business, as well as internal processes, and then customer-facing things as well. And so I look to see the latter half of 2021 as being something where we really demonstrate differentiation between Henry and our competitors as perceived by a broad variety of our customers. And so that's pretty exciting. So I can't wait to get to that. So mistakes that I'm trying to avoid, I don't have a whole lot more slides. In fact, this is the last one. Is communication, and with my existing team especially, but also with my stakeholders. So I spent 3 years at a prior company, similar in some ways, very different in others, but a similar mission. And we were able to get the things done there that I was brought in there to do, which is one of the reasons I felt good about being able to leave that role and take this role on. But one of the mistakes I made in that was I was so confident in the keeping the lights on capabilities of the existing team that I was bringing in all kinds of new aspects for companies we didn't have because we were never asked to do them. Very similar to what we're talking about here with this company, with Henry. And I left too many gaps in communication directly between me and the folks in the trenches there. And it was also in a different physical location, about an hour south of Dallas, which is where I'm based. And so I had one of my directors let me know that there's confusion. They're wondering what's going on. Are their jobs safe? Which was just devastating to me because it's the opposite of what my plan was for them. Now, this director happened to know everything that was going on and just clearly wasn't communicating in as much as I thought he was. But I wasn't the one that was communicating. So instead of me reacting inappropriately and incorrectly and thinking, well, what have you been saying to them? I owned it. And, the lesson came to me from a book that I've given it to my last 3 leadership teams, Extreme Ownership, by 2 Navy SEALs. It's a great, quick read, but the ultimate message to me that I'm bringing to you here right now is that no matter what happens, anywhere on my team, I own it. We've got some glitches right now with this data center migration that was planned by predecessor. I own it. My deal. No finger pointing. I mean, they're mine. And we're fixing them. But own those things, and owning communication is key. So I met with that team that next Monday morning, and I apologized to them, and I didn't make that mistake again with them. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that in the absence of information, misinformation flourishes. And so whether it's just confusion or you've got detractors out there, the water cooler rumors will start to grow. So anticipate it and preempt it. And so over communicate. When you think you're doing it enough, double down. And so that's one of the things I'm making sure I do with this team, which is why we got daily stand-ups and why we got these other things. I've got daily leadership team meeting as well across the C-suite, and they know exactly what we're working on as well. And so I'm really looking to avoid that. How I fill gaps. And so I ended up building a fairly sizable team compared to what I inherited at my previous company. And then as the company hit some significant headwinds, we had to trim the sales and lay off. And I'm not going to go through that again. And so I've decided to really engage partners in the private equity space. We move fast anyways. We will hire I've already hired some full-time employees, and we will hire where we're at the right moves to hire them. But I'm just opening the aperture here, my lens, to really look at leveraging partners more than I did in the last company. So I'm really being more broadly thinking how I fill these gaps. And then I'm also keeping a keen eye on readiness for the change, right? And so we had a couple of efforts in my last company and even in previous to that, where we had all the buy-in at the C-suite level and want to do this thing. And we found out that, giving an example, a commissioning system. We had one where we committed that these are going to be the commission plans that we've got. It's a real beating to do in spreadsheets and it was impacting payroll and everything. We brought in a great platform. And then what we found was that sales leadership kept coming up with new plans and it just became more expensive to use the platform because we weren't ready to commit to a standard set and to be consistent in how we did commissioning plans. No harm, no foul, but it really changed the math on that system decision that we made. And so I'm being much more smart about checking readiness, testing readiness, and I look for what could go wrong, what could throw the value of this solution off the rails, what could make the math go upside down. And so I really keep an eye on that as well. And so these are some of the things that I'm trying to manage right now. We've got a lot of things moving. Don't have enough people to handle it right now. And so I'm leaning on partners, leaning on the team, and really looking to shift the talent that I've got from what's burying them right now into all the strategic stuff that's really the higher value add stuff. And so I'm really trying to keep an eye on pace with them as well. And I'm very specific to them about when their noses go underwater. And I tell them, I expect to see a hand raise and wave the flag, say, hey, Rusty, I've got too much. I've got 10 things on the plate. Give me the top 3 that I can knock out right now. And I explain to them that this is a sign of strength to me, that anyone who can share that, I know that I can keep putting things on the plate because they'll tell me and I can back off and help prioritize, but that things aren't just going to go off the rails in a blind spot for me. And so to me, I proactively help them understand that's how I like to be dealt with. I like to understand when you think you're at your limit, when we need to get some help. I'm all about it. And this is part of my belief on my role in helping serve them so that they can be successful. I kind of threw a lot at you right now. That's kind of the whirlwind that we're at. I think maybe you get a sense of the pace that I have right now, but that's kind of the approach that I'm taking, the lessons I've learned. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Rusty. I told you folks he was going to speak very candidly and not bog you down with tons and tons of slides. So I really appreciate that. We can stop sharing. We can certainly jump into Q&A because we've got quite a few questions coming in from the audience here. First question comes from Tanweer. Hi there, Tanweer. He says, first and foremost, hi, Rusty. Nice seeing you virtually.
Tanweer.
So he asks, how would you apply bootstrapping techniques to a traditionally broken IT financial organization?
Can you say that again, Jason?
How would you apply bootstrapping techniques to a traditional broken IT financial organization?
That's where I've done it. And I think probably a more appropriate example would be 2 companies ago. I was at a Fortune 500 company, very well-run company in their space, but IT was purely set in their ways. Waterfall, Gartner's mode 1, they were mode 0.1. I think they were just but what they delivered was solid. And I came in and instituted Agile, extremely disruptive. And I went about it the wrong way, I think. To me, it was so obvious that it was so needed. What I decided to do after meeting significant resistance, a big SAP shop, was, and resistance from people who were smart and good at what they did. I localized the Agile process initially to a particular customer portal project that was brand new. And as we started expanding this program, I actually ended up using Agile methodology to make changes in our SAP world. And what I found was that, the folks that were responsible for managing the environment, things like this, were rightfully uncomfortable with changing the environment every 2 weeks, and running everything through the landscape. And so my initial reaction was, well, I just need to help them understand. But my approach was to go meet them where they were and listen. And what I discovered was, in part, and in a good part, that these are the people that wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning when something doesn't work. And they're called to do that. They've all got a team of people that are working through a weekend whenever we're pushing a new change through a landscape. So it's a lot of work, very different than some other environments. Now, there's a little bit of a flavor, and I categorize people when faced with a change, just hits them in the face. They respond one of two ways: either why we can't or why can't we. Now, the main leader in this area was one of those why we can't people, so I had to work my way through that. But the agreement we came to was, okay, we will make changes every 2 weeks in the dev environment. And then every 2 months or 3 months, or whenever we hit something significant, we'll push it and plan for it, and we'll push it through the landscape. But part of my job was also to educate them that Agile is not Wild Wild West. It's very disciplined. It can sometimes be too disciplined, but it's very disciplined. It's once they start to understand what doesn't fall off the wagon when we're doing it, they get more and more comfortable. So I give them some breathing room, but that's how I do it. And I think once you get some wins, so many people want to jump on the bandwagon. And then you got to get them educated so that they come in knowing what Agile is and understanding the process and those kinds of things. So I had a lot of education to do outside of IT also. But surprisingly, my biggest resistance there was within IT.
Brilliant. Hopefully that answers your question, Tanwir. We then have a couple of questions around the outsourced commodity work. So I'll kind of combine the two into one, but Jeff Strain asks, what are the types of commodity work you offloaded? You mentioned cybersecurity monitoring. What about patching, upgrades, updates? Did you find that you were able to do them better, cheaper, faster outsourced? With modernizing, would outsourcing or additional FTE and then attrition bring you back down to be a better approach? And that goes in tandem with what Jed Brunson had asked in the chat feature here, like what was the motivation of outsourcing commodity work? Was it essentially cost savings? So a couple of areas about the outsourced work there.
Great questions. And first, it was not cost savings. This cost us a lot more in the budget to do it. I think what it really was is we didn't have the skill sets in-house to do it right. There are people out there that can scale, and because of their scale, and even some of them, even like help desk, but also security, the automation that they have allows them to provide it to us at a level of proficiency that we couldn't afford to do to reach the same way. So to me, it was not a cost play at all. This is not something where I wanted to save costs. I wanted to make sure this was being done right. You cannot do this wrong. Even things maybe less important than cybersecurity, like the IT help desk. We got great people, but we're terrible at it because we don't have enough people for the demand we've got. I mean, even issuing laptops, with COVID, the process had to change. We had things in the office, it happens to be in El Segundo, south of LAX. People aren't in the office anymore. So now they've got to go in, get something, provision it, get it out and mail it. And so we're offloading that too. To our VAR to let them provision with our image and directly ship it out. To me, that's the kind of task I believe that, and this is the first time I've outsourced anything like that too. So it's not like this is just my page out of the playbook and I'm doing it. I don't believe in cookie cutter for any of the places where I've gone to bootstrap. And so I think it's very tuned to that particular environment. So if you've got the talent on the team, this may not be the right move. But we don't even have well-documented processes for some of these things. It's just heroics. These folks just do what they do and they're up all night doing it. And so we will offload this and we will have a partner that will document this process. And if 2 years from now, we decide for whatever reason, we want to insource it, we'll have the ability to do it and we'll insource a better process than we ever could create it. And so for us, it's not a cost play, it's a competency play. And I think that, I've got a director, one of the guys who I'm blessed enough to have in his team, has been with the company 24 years, fantastic, knows where almost all the bodies are buried. And Some of where he didn't know where the bodies are buried are kind of the shrapnel that we're dealing with from this migration move. But but he is going to be great at doing some of the to-be work. You know, it's much more strategic. It's much more valuable, and he wants to do it. You know, I asked him, I offered him, and who wouldn't want to be a part of that rather than just dealing with all this other stuff? So I can outsource that and improve the career of this part of the team and really get them on a track that's great for their development.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Moving on, a question here from Megan. First of all, Megan mentioned in the chat feature, she definitely agrees with taking responsibility. As for so many years, IT are obfuscated things to a large degree. That's not a word I know. I believe in full transparency and appreciate that you are willing to take responsibility for resolving something you did not create. So kudos to that, first and foremost. And then Megan asks, mentioning she does a lot of work with STEM-focused organizations, trying to increase the numbers of women in tech. In your recruiting and staffing efforts, how do you support goals for diversity while also needing to get the job done, i.e. often takes longer to find and recruit diversity candidates?
Great question. You know, I think at my last two companies, I was very intentional about seeking difference, right? And seeking to spot opportunities to put women in bigger roles, but groom them and make sure that they're going to be successful in it, not for a number. I thought they were talented. I've got two kids, one boy, one girl. They're both in STEM. My daughter's graduating from college this year. And so it's been a focus of mine for many years. And I take a lot of pride in the trail that I'm leaving in terms of leaders who've worked for me who are in bigger roles now. So I do pay attention to it. I also look for people I recruit who may not have a college degree. I think it's very overrated and for a lot of roles. I've seen people with multiple degrees that didn't turn out to be impressive. And so to me, it's all about the individual, not about the school you go to. But I do think that there's some new ways to look for talent in different places. Companies like Empower, who transitions military veterans out of the military and they groom them with certain technology skills and things like that is one thing. Year Up is another one. And so great question. I haven't made any moves yet here where I am now. I don't have women leaders on my team right now. If I add leaders, that's certainly going to be a focus of mine. And I don't think it'll be hard to find great ones. I've recruited quite a few. I've poached people from previous companies, some of whom may be even on this call. But yeah, it's good. That's a great point. We've all got to keep an eye on doing that. I've got that opportunity ahead of me with Henry Company.
That's fantastic. And I actually want to ask a little question of my own before I go to one of the final questions here. But so along that lines, you mentioned something that really resonates with me. As much as I feel education is important in everyone's lives, we know that not everybody is given all the opportunities to get the level of education as everybody else. And, you know, college degree isn't everything. One thing you mentioned in your presentation was about finding that moral compass. How do you identify that moral compass when building your team outside of asking something as blatant as, you know, do you like puppies or something? It's a tricky one, right? But I very much hear what you're saying, and it really resonates with me because that's something that's near and dear to my heart. So I'd love to get your perspective on how you go about trying to really hone in on that moral compass.
That's a great question. You know, there's two parts to it. When you're interviewing people, that's one a little bit more difficult. I do ask questions just roundabout to find out more about the person, what they do with their spare time and how they deal with certain situations. I certainly don't claim to be super skilled at ferreting that out, you know, in an interview process. But when I get to a team and those who know me or who've worked with or for me over the past 10 years will know the phrase Navy SEAL IT is what I call it. And that's my goal is to build what I call a Navy SEAL IT team. And I've not served, but I've got immense respect for that. But the metaphor I use with it here is a smaller number of people that are super high caliber and have immense trust in each other. And so they know how to get along because the mission is always what they're all about. And I've had smaller IT teams that have just smoked larger IT infantry teams, to keep with the same analogy. And so I explain this when I come into a company and a team that I'm preparing to bootstrap to that next level. And I set the expectation. And at my last company, I had one of the directors, we had this conversation, and then he just did something that went against every grain of what that trust was and what that is. And I intervened immediately, had a conversation with him about it, and he made the mistake again a few weeks later, and he was gone. To me, I'm crystal clear about what it means about building trust. This mission is greater than you. Any leader on my team, leaders are all truly servant. It's a servant role. And I know that's such a cliche term, servant leadership. It's on everyone's LinkedIn profile. To me, I recommend people don't put it on your profile because anybody can claim it. And so other people will declare whether or not you were a servant in the role of leadership that you were in when you led them or led people around them. And so I look for those traits. And I think, you're around someone long enough, you may not know it up front when you interview, you may not know it, but I intervene immediately and I check and I get that. And then it's a one strike after that, you're done. And I think it's so important, may seem less forgiving, but that's something I won't forget. I mean, you're unethical or you're not. I mean, you're not like unethical at home and not unethical at work. See, that's how you're wired. You're either that way or you're not, in my view. And so I think, I give a very short leash and I pull the trigger.
Love it. Love it. And the reason I ask is just as we know, yes, okay, technical astuteness, etc., and understanding, very important in your guys' roles. We understand that, but ultimately you are leaders, you are managers, you are team leaders. And
to that role, Jason, I don't care how good they are and what they do. I don't care at all. I will not tolerate keeping it, even if I got to bring a contractor or a consultant or vendors or spend more money doing it to cover the skill that they take with them when they leave, or the knowledge, if they know where all the bodies are buried, doesn't matter. I will not be held hostage to something that critical.
Fantastic answer. So 2 final questions, one a little bit longer, the other one very quickly. They just came up in the chat feature here, but the one that I'm really intrigued by is asked by Nathan Oglesby. Nathan asks, when you were interviewing for CIO with Henry, what are the questions you wished they would have asked or information they should have disclosed to help you know more of what you were inheriting?
I got to tell you, they were fully transparent. It's funny because this started with the retained search firm, and then with the CEO, and he was really very, very candid. Everything he's told me, even with the where we looked like we were going as a company in terms of financially and everything like that. I mean, that part was even conservative, and he told me that it's conservative, but they were super honest about everything I'd be getting into. The interview process was really, really interesting. I mentioned earlier that he has methodically gone through to build the leadership team for this company. And some have been there a while, but different roles or whatever, and many are new within the last 3 years. And so he was very, very detailed. After I interviewed with him twice and with the private equity firm twice, I went through a 6-hour behavioral interview that started with your childhood. And so it was full disclosure, and I'm full disclosure also. I'm not hiding anything. They want to know your successes, your failures, whatever it was. I was open book about it all, and they were open book with me. And so, unfortunately, I don't get to give you any good meat in terms of what I wish they would have asked. But I think what I ask though is, how sensitive is our business to the economy, right? These are something I ask things about, how open to this mission were the rest of the leadership, how committed to it were they? You know, the ham and egg breakfast, how committed to the changes that I'm being brought in to do, how committed is the rest of the team to doing that? Because it's change, and change is hard, and that's what I do. And you know, he was purely honest about that, but that's up to us to ask. The other thing was what I mentioned a minute ago was sensitivity to the economy. I mean, we're all expecting economies go up and they go down, and they're certainly going to be coming down and back up again at some point. But some companies get hammered when like I was in the dining restaurant industry for a while. We'll never do that again, only because it's so vulnerable to the economy. And so I wanted to understand where we were. And if we're dealing with commercial as well as residential, that's a little bit of a hedge. And repair and remodel restoration as well as new construction is a bit of a hedge there. And so he had really good answers about our strategy and our approach. And my main thing was, is this CEO in tune with where the levers are in the economy? Because companies that I worked for years ago, this one CEO wasn't, and the company went through a bloodbath. And so that's a lesson I want to learn just once.
Yes, very well said. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. The final question just quickly was, could you just, Norm was asking what the name of the book you mentioned was that was written by 2 Navy SEALs. You mentioned
Yeah. So it's called Extreme Ownership. And Leif Babin is one, and Jocko Willink is the other author. Great book, and highly recommend it. I've heard the audiobook is even better. I was old school. Another book I would recommend is Exponential Organizations, and just a very different way of looking at how we solve problems, particularly around technology and things like this. I think it could be eye-opening and put a few arrows in your quiver as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, without further ado, I'd like to give a massive virtual round of applause to Rusty. Thank you so much for your time today, Rusty, and your insight. That was absolutely fantastic. Some great